Doctor, we've had a back and forth week with some politicians, particularly over the issue of the source of this virus sort of occurred in a Wuhan lab, and accepting your word that this was not something Machiavellian on your part. Joe Rogan wrote in the Washington Post today, the foreign policy columnist, that what everyone can now see clearly is that the NIH was collaborating on risky research with a Chinese lab that had zero transparency, zero accountability during a crisis. No one in a position of power, he says, addressed that. Fauci is arguing the system worked. It didn't. What do you make of that?
Yeah. It's more complicated than that, Neil. I don't know if we can explain it in the brief period of time we have. If you look at the research that was done, it was research that was highly recommended by peer-reviewed, our United States peer reviews. It got a very high score in the peer review system. And the purpose of the research was very, very clear. It was to try and determine what was out there in the bat population that might be ultimately risky for us. It was done in the context of trying to find out what the precise environmental bat source was of SARS-CoV-1 so that we could prevent SARS-CoV-2. So it was research that was done by qualified people. Right now, when there's all of this thing about China, that's a different situation now. Back then, when you were dealing with qualified, highly respected Chinese scientists. So it isn't what was made out to be about dealing with really, really bad people, because those scientists were very well respected in the scientific community, internationally. And you could just ask. But
in retrospect, Doctor, and I know you've been asked and then got very heated on, in retrospect, looking back at that funding role, do you regret that, knowing what has transpired since? Not that any of your decisions might have led to the very outbreak of a virus over which you've argued many times you had nothing to do with, but that it shows that the Chinese, even to this day, reluctant and refusing to go back to those origins. Was it worth it in retrospect?
Well, the idea and the scientific decision to look and screen in the place where the viruses emerge was a good, proper scientific decision. The one thing none of us like is what this has all turned into, which is something that is just very complicated and very, I would say confrontative, which it really should not be.
But nasty, right, Doctor? I mean, even nasty. Just now, Congressman Madison Cawthorn has said that if Republicans gain control, he wants you investigated for being a pawn of the Chinese government. Rand Paul all but blamed the deaths of all these people worldwide on you, even though he backed off of some of that.
I would hope so.
Thinking about what you got involved in with President Trump in the beginning when all of this started, had you ever gotten to the point where you just want to say, the hell with it, I don't need this?
No, I'm a scientist, and my job, which I'm doing, which we've done, was to develop the vaccines that have saved millions of lives already, is to be a scientist and a public health official. I certainly don't like how all this has turned out to be so contentious. I mean, and when a congressman makes a statement that, I forgot what it was, that if they take over the House in 2022, I should be criminally investigated. On what basis is he making that comment? And Neil, I mean, you've got to get realistic about that. I mean, yes, we had somewhat of a confrontation with Senator Paul because of the, I think, inflammatory statements that he made about lying. But where do you come off about talking about criminal things and conspiring?
Do you think any of this comes back, though, Doctor? I mean, you challenged President Trump at the time on a couple of things. You weren't in your face about it. You questioned some things. And this all emanates from that, and that it still lingers to this day.
Yeah. Neil, I really want to concentrate on my job as a scientist and a public health official. But you asked the question, I'd have to give you an honest answer. I think there's no doubt that because I had to speak the truth during the Trump administration, which at times was contrary to President Trump, that annoyed a lot of people who got very upset with me. But I wasn't doing anything personal. I was just trying to speak the truth about what was really going on with the outbreak. And it was nothing at all against President Trump. And in fact, if you look at the record, I have never said anything derogatory against the president. I was only talking about correcting misstatements about the science. I had nothing against the president at all, not at all. And he knows that. In fact, he even says that at times. But when I was saying things that this is not going to just disappear, that this is not going to just go away, that we do have a very serious problem, that annoyed a lot of Trump loyalists. I'm very sorry that it annoyed them, but it is the truth. And that's what I was trying to do and still do, is to tell the truth.
Any regrets?
I never have a regret about telling the truth or about doing my job.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you very, very much. Very good talking to you, sir.